Let's be honest, nobody really takes television seriously. Sure, everybody watches TV shows, everybody's always talking about TV shows, and more money is being spent on them nowadays than ever before, and yet I don't really see the same kind of interest in the medium of television itself from viewers as I do with other mediums like film, or music, or even anime. Cinephiles will scour Letterboxd in search of the most obscure films to consume, and Sakuga nerds will accumulate an encyclopedic amount of information concerning their favourite productions, but who is out there making top 10 TV shows of the 1970s lists, or writing essays about the post-Wednesday Play generation of British TV writers? No one. Well, they might be out there somewhere, but they certainly don't have the same kind of cultural cachet or recognition as those other fandoms, or whatever you want to call them. And I think this is unfortunate because throughout the 80-odd years since its inception, television has produced a number of brilliant works of art and has traversed many noteworthy aesthetic developments and transformations, all of which are perfectly deserving of scholarly attention. So I've started compiling a list of TV shows that I think are worth recommending, and I will be making a series of videos in which I will do just that, recommend some shows. And these series might not all be great, although many of them will be, but they're all at the very least interesting or noteworthy in some respect, and I will do my best to communicate why I think that is. And seeing as one of the main reasons why television is not generally held in as high regard as, say, cinema, is probably because of the perceived commercial restrictions limiting its artistic potential and stymieing formal experimentation, I thought it would be a good idea to conceive the first video in this series around the theme of weird shit. TV shows that prove that television can be an exciting and creative medium that presents genuinely novel avenues for artistic expression and experimentation. Small disclaimer before we actually begin, unfortunately due to the relative obscurity of many of these works, a few of them are not available to me in high definition, so prepare yourself for some footage of truly questionable quality. On the other hand, given the subject matter of these shows, the low quality does in a way enhance the phantasmagorical atmosphere. And that's definitely the case with the first series I want to tell you about, Sky from 1975. For some reason, British children's shows in the 1970s were completely batshit. You had stuff like Children of the Stones, The Owl Service, The Intruder, Escape into Night, really bizarre, creepy stuff that doesn't really seem entirely appropriate for a young audience, and Sky was probably the most surreal of the lot. It's about a blue-eyed alien who arrives on Earth but finds himself in the wrong time period and therefore must find a way to get to the future, all the while contending with a personification of nature itself who rejects Sky's plans for mankind's future development.
You.
Michael, get him out of here! He's evil! Get him out!
Get out! Get out! Avoid thee! There is nothing I can do. This is the animals.
What makes watching Sky such a surreal experience is a mixture of a few different things. Firstly, the serial has a very slow pace, which, combined with the brilliantly eerie score, produces a sort of hypnagogic atmosphere. And then of course there's the trippy visual effects, which make the series feel more like a strange art house project than a normal children's show. Lars von Trier's Kingdom is probably the least obscure entry on this list, but it's definitely one of the craziest. It's no secret that The Kingdom was, to some degree at least, Lars von Trier's answer to Twin Peaks. However, The Kingdom offers a very different experience to Lynch's surreal murder mystery, notably in its tone. Whereas Twin Peaks leans into that warm, inviting soap opera aesthetic, making the show's ventures into outright surrealism feel almost like a natural extension of the soap opera's inherently dreamlike qualities, The Kingdom, on the other hand, draws on the kind of realism that would become the hallmark of von Trier's Dogma 95 movement. He opts for that quasi-documentary style of filming. And so what's so intriguing about this series is how it travels from one tone or style to the other, from realism to surrealism, from the naturalistic to the supernatural, from tragedy to farce.
Och Gud vad vackert det är. Och så beslutsamt att bryta ur vattnet. Och ändå så fast förankrat i svenskt berg. Dansk jävlar! Vad fan har det här att göra? Jag måste vidare.
The joy of The Kingdom is in watching the story's gradual descent into absolute lunacy, as each of its plotlines develop and begin to intersect in increasingly absurd ways. And just like David Lynch with Twin Peaks: The Return, von Trier recently concluded the story with a third and final season. And while I don't think Exodus is quite as good as the first two seasons, it's certainly an enjoyable and worthwhile continuation of the original show's grotesque absurdity.
Der står en tiger. Nu kommer den hen imod mig.
Bring dig til et eller andet dyrbulder, så du kan redde dig. Hvad forvandlede du dig til?
Se en pingvin.
En pingvin? Sig mig engang, er du helt idiot?
Dennis Potter was, without a doubt, one of the greatest TV writers of all time, with series like Pennies from Heaven and The Singing Detective, as well as a number of successful TV plays, cementing his position as one of Britain's most original storytellers. However, in 1989, Dennis Potter released a show called Black Eyes, and it was met with, to put it mildly, divisive critical reception. The show was criticised for its explicit sexual content. The Sunday Express called it the world's most complicated porn film, earning Potter the nickname Dirty Den. Viewers also found the series immensely boring and pretentious, so you probably won't be surprised to hear me say that Black Eyes is actually great, one of the most experimental television productions ever conceived. Black Eyes is a metatextual story that operates on multiple levels at once, narrations nested within narrations. Essentially, it's the story of a perverted old man who uses his niece's life story as inspiration for a novel about a model's journey into the exploitative world of modeling and advertising, and the niece's attempts to rewrite the story in order to, as the narrator, Potter himself, puts it, rescue her own past from the old man's wet-mouthed version of it. In many ways, it's a fairly on-the-nose exploration of many topics that we're very familiar with nowadays, such as the male gaze, sexual objectification, and exploitation, but what elevates Black Eyes beyond such surface-level observations is Potter's knack for composing exquisitely labyrinthine tales that fuse poetic musings with convoluted Borgesian plots. Fans of Edgar Wright will most likely be aware of his short-lived TV series Spaced, starring frequent collaborators Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. However, they may not be aware of the fact that 3 years prior to Spaced, Edgar Wright had already directed a comedy series starring Simon Pegg called Asylum. Here, Pegg plays a pizza delivery driver who makes a delivery to this mansion where a doctor has set up a bizarre social experiment.
Like some men and ladies from the world. 6 years ago, I advertised for volunteers to come and stay at my isolated mansion. Perhaps for a bit, perhaps forever. My name is Dr. Lovett, and this is my asylum.
Simon Pegg's character ends up being essentially gaslit into thinking that he's actually a mentally unstable patient who only believes himself to be a pizza delivery boy.
Why do you think you're here?
Kidder. I came to deliver a pizza. Do you remember? Simon, pizza?
You've really got something missing in your life, haven't you?
Well, yeah, a super deluxe deep pan beef magic.
Enough. From now on, there'll be no more talk of pizzas, a clean sheet. And what does this remind you of?
What? Pizza?
Nurse.
Aside from its surreal atmosphere, what's most noteworthy to me about this series is its unique format. It's part sitcom, part variety show. It features a blend of stand-up comedy, musical numbers, and a continuous storyline about Simon Pegg's character's integration into the asylum and gradual descent into madness.
I wonder if you could help me. Somebody's ordered a pizza and they're not claiming it.
Oh, God, that's awful.
Yeah, and I've got a few other deliveries to make, so if you could...
Yeah, well, all imagine here, so you just sit down and I'll make a phone call, sort it out.
Sure, thank you.
Hello? Yeah, I don't really know what happens. Yeah, well, basically, you need someone to pay for it. No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Sorry, that's a toy phone.
Sorry, you've caught me out.
In 1982, British TV director Andrew Gosling decided to adapt the pulpy comic strip Jane, and to do so he would employ a visual device he had already explored on a few previous productions, notably the variety comedy series The End of the Pier Show, the 1976 adaptation of The Snow Queen, and The Light Princess from 1978, and that device was the blue screen. While still fairly rudimentary, Gosling's use of the blue screen on his two Jane series was arguably his most sophisticated deployment of this technology thus far. The show was even awarded a BAFTA for Best Graphics.
We've been hit!
Below the belt, and I'm not taking it lying down.
Jane, where the devil are you going? Oh, sorry, good shot. But it's time to abandon ship, Jane. She's going down, and all the boats have gone. Come, we'll have to swim for it, old girl.
Well, worse things happen at sea. Come on, Fritz. Over we go.
The series follows the adventures of the titular Jane as she finds herself unwittingly embroiled in the kinds of adventure plots typical of the pulp fiction of the first half of the 20th century, albeit with a healthy sprinkling of salacious situations. As you can see, the blue screen here is used to mimic the paneling of the original comic and integrates the actors into that cartoony environment. This one definitely falls into the not particularly good but still noteworthy category, but if you're looking for a TV show with a visual presentation you will never really get used to and will just continue to baffle you throughout the whole thing, then Jane and its sequel Jane in the Desert are definitely what you're looking for.
While London is pluckily braving the worst of the Blitz, Jane waits to meet her new Secret Service chief, Commander L. In what dangerous position will Jane find herself next?
And talking about comic book adaptations, in recent years we've had a lot of takes on the superhero genre, but I think I can confidently say that my favourite superhero series of all time is The Max, which aired on MTV in 1995. Adapted from the comic of the same name by Sam Keith, The Max is a surreal and grungy story about the conflict between Max, a homeless man who lives in a box, and Mr. Gon, a seemingly immortal telepath. Max's life is split between two worlds, the real world and an alternate reality called the Outback, where he serves as the heroic protector of the Jungle Queen, who in the real world is a social worker named Julie Winters, although she is not aware of her parallel existence in the Outback. What really sets this series apart, aside from the inherently nightmarish qualities of the source material, is how the show adapts the peculiar style and atmosphere of the original comic to animation.
Sometimes it's luck that saves them. Sometimes it's fate.
Hey, Fridge, here's another one. You ever seen anybody with so much change in their purse, huh, Fridge? I say, you ever seen anybody with... What? Who are you?
Given how bizarre Xavier Renegade Angel is, I'm actually surprised by how often I see people talking about it. The show seems to have developed a strong cult following over the years. However, I virtually never hear anyone talking about what could be seen as Vernon Chatman's spiritual sequel to Xavier Renegade Angel, and that is The Shivering Truth.
I don't know, Doc. People tell me I should be paranoid, but I got nothing to be afraid of.
Do you think it's because of those?
Those what? What's the problem?
Genuinely one of the most impressive and inventive works of animation produced in the past decade, The Shivering Truth continues the exquisite corpse-style storytelling from Xavier Renegade Angel, but loses the protagonist. So all we're left with is a series of increasingly absurd and strangely existential stop-motion sketches.
Fred quit leaning on quick fixes and turned to a life of substance. Nothing was dense enough. Mornings, he would wake in Blake, roll up a Freud, and cook some Baldwin brownies. Soon, he started mainlining the beats.
In 1997, British comedy writer Chris Morris created the radio program Blue Jam, known for its surreal sketches and ambient soundtrack. And a few years later, he would adapt the show to television, even sometimes reusing some of the original audio sketches from the radio program and having the actors lip-sync their lines, which may sound like a rather strange thing to do until you realize how perfectly it fits with the very specific kind of what I can only describe as atmospheric absurdity this series operates within. And to be honest, there's not much I can really say to describe Jam that wouldn't be better conveyed by simply showing you it.
We specialise in providing thick people for jobs that they're particularly good at. Arguments. Thick people are very good at winning arguments because they're too thick to realise that they've lost.
So it's not your car then, madam?
No, I'm picking it up for Mr. Hunter. I'm not Mr. Hunter.
Okay. Fill that form in for me, and that'll be £165, please.
It's worth more than that. It's worth about £12,000.
No, £165 is the fine you have to pay.
Don't see why I should pay £165 when Mr. Hunter's already paid £12,000.
Look, I know Mr. Hunter owns the car, but it was parked in a restricted area.
Right.
Do you know what a restricted area is?
No.
Well, it's an area where there are parking meters, right? Do you know what parking meters are?
Yes, I know what a parking meters are.
Right. Your Mr. Hunter's parking meter was over time.
He hasn't got a parking meter.
The one he was at.
He was at a meeting.
Yeah, well, his car was at a parking meter and he didn't put enough money in it, right?
He puts his money in the car.
Well, he should have put it in the parking meter. You put money in the parking...
No, he puts it in a tray.
I'm saying he didn't put enough money in the parking meter.
And I just said he puts his money in the car.
I'm not talking about the car, I'm talking about the parking meter, all right?
What?
Because he didn't put enough money in the parking meter.
It's not a parking meter, it's a car.
I know, it's a fucking car, you stupid woman! For Christ's sake! All right, madam, you can take the car. Off you go, it's yours.
I can take the car?
Yes.
Ooh. Thank you very much.
Right.
You didn't have to shout at me like that.
Yeah, could you leave, please?
Sticking with the realm of British radio for a second, let's talk about The Goon Show. The Goon Show was a popular radio comedy show that aired in the 1950s and starred Peter Sellers, Harry Seacombe and Spike Milligan. Milligan was the lead writer of the program, known for its absurd storylines, cartoony cast of characters and inventive use of sound effects. But Spike Milligan was also a troubled man, suffering from multiple mental breakdowns throughout the show's run, one of which saw him convinced he needed to kill his co-star Peter Sellers, and so he attempted to break into Sellers' apartment armed with a potato knife, but instead he walked through a glass door and was taken to the hospital. He then returned to writing and performing in the show for another 7 seasons. In the 1960s, Spike Milligan would write and appear in a number of television shows that sought to translate the bizarre humour of The Goon Show to this new medium of television, eventually culminating in the long-running Q series, starting with Q5 in 1969. Incidentally, both The Goon Show and Q5 were a massive influence on Monty Python. To say that Milligan's manic tendencies were apparent in his style of comedy would be an understatement. The frantic quality of his writing suggests someone who was constantly in search of something to play with, something to deconstruct, just throwing everything at the wall until something sticks, or until the wall itself comes down. While The Goon Show relied heavily on creative use of sound and toyed with the audience's lack of visual information in order to subvert what the listener imagines is going on in a given scene, with the Q series, Milligan adapts his particular brand of lunacy to this new visual medium. He constantly foregrounds the materiality of the television production, crafting jokes out of the artificiality of sets and costumes and props.
By Jove, I enjoyed that swim, Jim.
So did I, Eric.
But it's not real water, you know.
No.
It's only a piece of paper with the water painted on it. That's why we're not wet.
Of course. But as we're dry, why don't we do a sketch on land together?
Splitting idea. Let's do it over here when we were marked for the rehearsal this afternoon. Yes, right. Knock, knock, knock on the invisible door.
Coming along the invisible hall. Walk, walk, walk. Click, squeak, crunch. Open.
Hello, we have reason to believe that you are a man standing in an invisible hall.
Yes, but he's out. Can I help you?
Yes. We are Jehovah burglars.
But I'm not Jewish.
I'm coming to that later. You see, me and my friend here are being persecuted for our beliefs by the police.
What are your beliefs?
We believe you've got a lot of good silverware and stuff like that in the house.
Good heavens, that's absolutely true.
We only believe in the absolutely true.
What are you doing? You! But why are you removing that very valuable silverware? It should be kept in a safe, and it's mine.
Needless to say that the Q series is an acquired taste. Spike Milligan's incessant wordplay and anarchic style will not be for everyone, but personally, I find that the comedy in Q comes not so much from the content of the jokes themselves, but rather from the entire means of expression of the joke. Sketch shows are usually very hit or miss. You'll have a good one, then a few weaker ones, then another good one. It's just the nature of the format, they can't all be bangers.
So, running order for the show, I was thinking hit, miss, hit, hit, miss, hit, miss, hit, miss, hit, hit, miss, hit, miss. What do you think?
Are we definitely going for the whole hit and miss thing?
It's a sketch show, it's got to be hit and miss, that's what people expect.
But to me, Milligan's comedy is about the absurdity of the whole endeavour, not just the punchline or gimmick of a particular sketch. There's a sense of madness that pervades the whole thing, and so even the weaker sketches get swept up in that spiralling delirium.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is no known cure for this disease. Therefore, there can be no known ending to this sketch.
Talking of acquired tastes, I'm a big fan of Peter Greenaway's films. The Draftsman's Contract, The Falls, A Z and Two Noughts, Drowning by Numbers are all among my favourites. But I have a somewhat ambivalent relationship to the digital experimentation and use of overlaid imagery that's endemic to his later work. While I do enjoy how this visual experimentation merges with the narrative complexity and absurdity of a film like The Tall Slooper Suitcases, I find the very same gimmicks almost off-putting in films like The Pillow Book and Eisenstein in Guanajuato. And it seems that Greenaway's interest in these kinds of visual techniques can be traced back to a little-known TV series called A TV Dante. This adaptation of the Divine Comedy for television was a collaboration between Greenaway and the visual artist Tom Phillips, and we find in Phillips's collage work much of the inspiration for the peculiar visual presentation of the series.
With day departing, so the darkened air relieved the living creatures of the earth of their laborious tasks. And I, alone, prepared myself for my ordeal, to face the journey and the test of piety which memory, unerring, shall depict. Muses, high inspiration, help me now. You, memory, that wrote down what I saw, your prowess will be demonstrated here.
Now, I've introduced this show by talking about Peter Greenaway's involvement, but the second series, which adapts Cantos 9 through 14, was directed by another favourite filmmaker of mine, Raul Ruiz, and as you can see, the Chilean filmmaker takes a completely different approach. Gone is Greenaway's encyclopedic deconstruction of the text, and instead what we're left with is Ruiz's signature brand of surreal cinema. Of course, the visual fragmentation on display in this show, the experimental, the surreal, the didactic, documentary, is perfectly appropriate for a medium as inherently fragmented and eclectic as television. And that's why I think A TV Dante is the perfect work to end this video with. A piece of art that demonstrates clearly not only that television is and always has been a medium rife with creativity and buried treasures, but also that it is a medium that houses profound, untapped potential for artistic innovation. There are still so many unexplored directions and dimensions of this art form, and hopefully this series of videos will give you a better idea of all the things television has been and all the things television could one day become.